Everyone in Barrio Esperanza recognized the stooped silhouette of Señor Aurelio Santos long before they could make out the deep-lined map of his face. Morning spilled into Lazo Avenue, to the clatter of buses, horns, vendors' bells, and 1,000 impatient shoes. Yet Aurelio moved through the clamor with a patient, rounded gait, as if he could hear a different metronome hidden under the city's percussion. He carried a dinted watering can that glimmered like an old coin, and a pair of pruning shears whose handles he had wound with bright yellow twine so he might find them in the twilight if he dropped them. Officially, he was the caretaker of the narrow municipal garden wedged between the library's brick sidewall and the elevated train tracks, a sliver of land hardly wide enough for 3 palm trees and 2 benches. Unofficially, he was the neighborhood's keeper of small miracles, though only a handful of children knew the extent of that secret. It had begun 5 springs earlier, when Luia Montenegro, then 7, hovered at Aurelio's elbow while he was coaxing snapdragons into a cracked planter. Her father had been laid off yet again, and arguments at home had become routine storms. Luia slid a crumpled post-it into Aurelio's palm, whispered, "Por favor," and disappeared before he could ask questions. After hearing countless post-it he was instead asked questions. The note said, "I wish my papa could find work he loves." Its letters were blocky, the eyes topped with sloppy hearts. Aurelio reread the words, folded the paper, and looked at his garden box crammed with fresh seedlings. On a whim, he has always said it was a whim, though anyone who knew him suspected larger designs. He dug a finger-wide hole, tucked the note beneath a marigold root, and patted the soil closed. 2 weeks later, Lucia's father, out searching for construction, day labor, stopped to shield a cyclist who had been sideswiped by a taxi. The cyclist turned out to be an architect heading a new public housing project. Impressed by the stranger's calm efficiency and bilingual ease with rescue workers, she offered him an interview on the spot. By autumn, he wore a hard hat embossed with the city seal and returned home each evening, smelling contentedly of sawdust. When Lucia sprinted to the garden to thank Aurelio, she noticed the marigolds blazing richer gold than any she had ever seen. That same afternoon, she dragged 3 more classmates to the garden with folded bits of paper hidden in sweaty palms. Rumors spread in hushed giggles and conspiratorial winks across Esperanza Elementary. Children who normally ignored the municipal plot began filtering in at dismissal, pretending to browse the library while delivering their confidences to the old gardener. Aurelio never rejected a note, though he asked each child to read their wish aloud, because, he told them, words sprout stronger once they taste the air. He would listen gravely, nod, and pick a place where the soil felt thirsty. He required no payment except a promise that when the flowers bloomed, each wisher would water them once and remove any litter they found nearby. Miracles are like pigeons, he liked to say. They stay where the crumbs are. By midsummer, the unremarkable strip of land had become a riot of textures: velvet zinnias, feathery cosmos, pert geraniums, trumpeting lilies, and sunflowers so tall they bent under the weight of the elevated tracks, yet refused to snap. Grown-ups noticed the transformation only after the neighborhood's chronic graffiti vanished, covered by vines of morning glory so vigorous the spray paint ghosts were invisible. Someone asked who had approved the new landscaping budget. The Department of Parks issued a terse memo claiming credit, though the line item never appeared in public records. The train conductors, peering down, began slowing as they approached to admire the colors flashing back at their windows. The first wish that tested the garden's boundaries arrived on a rainy Thursday in October. Diego Salazar, a 10-year-old with a talent for mimicry and a stutter he loathed, handed Aurelio a damp envelope marked "Emergency." Inside, in painfully neat print, it read, "I wish I could speak in front of people without getting stuck." Diego had a school play the next week. Aurelio listened, then motioned toward the lone patch of bare ground under the middle palm. He tucked the wish beneath a sprig of foxglove, tapped the soil twice with his shears, and told Diego to come back the morning of the play. The boy did, shoulders tight as cello strings. The foxgloves had opened overnight, each bell speckled like quail eggs. Aurelio snipped a single bloom, told Diego to tuck it behind his ear for courage, and sent him off. That evening, neighbors crammed the school auditorium, heard the boy deliver his lines without a tremor. After the curtain call, a jubilant Diego raced to the garden, replaced the flower in the earth, and spent 20 minutes picking up cigarette butts and candy wrappers. Word that wishes came true, not just for family troubles, but for personal fears, electrified the younger population. Requests multiplied: a scholarship, a puppy, peace between feuding aunts, a bicycle safe from thieves, a grandmother's aching knees, an end to the power outages plaguing the East Bloc. Aurelio never guaranteed results, yet each bloom coincided with an unexpected resolution. The puppy arrived as an abandoned stray that trotted straight to the wisher's stoop. The two ants, assigned by random seating at a bingo night, laughed themselves breathless over identical misheard song lyrics, forgetting their long-held resentment. City engineers finally traced the East Block's outages to a single frayed junction box after a geranium's root lifted the sidewalk just enough to expose sparks at dusk. Adults, skeptical at first, could deny the pattern only so long. Still, pride and superstition kept most from admitting the gardener's role. Instead, they began dropping casual suggestions to their children. If you see Senor Santos today, maybe you could mention your Uncle Mateo's store rent. The children, empowered, set about triaging the wishes. Aurelio accepted them all, though he sometimes pressed a palm to the earth afterward, as if consulting a subterranean ally. He started sleeping fewer hours, waking before dawn, to catalog the swelling petals, worried some flowers might bloom unchaperoned and pour their magic into the world without guidance. Because that, he suspected, could turn blessings feral. One December evening, under streetlights fuzzed by swirling snow, Aurelio was locking the tool shed when a soft voice said, "May I make a wish?" He turned to find a woman about 30, cheeks flushed red under a knit cap. She introduced herself as Officer Marta Reyes, assigned to community relations. She had no children to act as intermediary, she explained, but she had watched the garden for months from her patrol car and felt certain something gentle was happening here. Aurelio hesitated. The secret felt balanced on a knife's edge, children's faith on one side, a grown-up's reason on the other. Yet Marta's eyes held the same tremulous hope he saw nightly in his smallest clients. He handed her a trowel. "Dig carefully," he said, "and speak clear." Her wish was whispered, a tremor of syllables that floated up with each exhale. "I wish the night shift could pass without a single violent call." Aurelio buried the note beneath a sleepy clump of winter pansies, whose purple faces peeked like candle stubs from the snow. The next morning, the precinct logged not one assault, robbery, or domestic dispute, a first in recorded history for that date. Officer Reyes returned at sunrise bearing 2 cups of cinnamon coffee and a promise to keep the garden's secret within those who understand quiet power. By early spring, the elevated train beams above the garden dripped with string lights. Neighbors had hung without permit, inspired by the colors below. Musicians began busking near the benches, confident of generous audiences, and with warm weather came the avalanche of wishes. Aurelio, whose knees ached from kneeling, pressed on, buoyed by the children's chatter and the way commuters began greeting one another instead of pretending invisibility. The garden was no longer a sliver of green, it had become a common stitched into the city's bustle. Yet every enchantment carries its shadow. The first sign arrived when a tulip unfurled 3 days too early, before the child who'd planted her wish returned from vacation to water it. Within hours, an improbable chain of events unfolded. A pressurized steam pipe beneath Main Street ruptured, causing a geyser that flooded traffic and forced evacuations. No one was hurt, but Aurelio felt a chill. The wish in question had been simple. "I want a giant surprise for my birthday." The child ultimately received a floating parade of inflatable animals arranged by the mayor as apology for the pipe disaster. The wish had delivered, yes, but it had claimed collateral chaos. Aurelio called a meeting at dusk, inviting every child who had ever buried a note. They sat cross-legged among the flower beds, trading secret thrill for apprehension. He explained that wishes were seeds, with roots both nourishing and disruptive. Intention guided the vines, but attention pruned them. He asked each child to consider the community in their wording, to imagine concentric ripples rather than a single splash. The children listened, solemn as city councilors. Diego, now vice president of the Student Senate, drafted a charter. Every wish must include a clause of kindness for someone beyond the wish. They taped copies to the library door and the lampposts outside the bodega. The new rule proved potent. When Karina Vega wished for her immigrant mother's licensing exam to go smoothly, she added, "and for her study group to help each other succeed." All 5 candidates, once strangers, formed a support circle, sharing flashcards and childcare. They each passed. When twins Mateo and Rafa yearned for a new soccer field, they appended and for it to be open to everyone, even kids from rival schools. The city repurposed a fenced parking lot. The grand opening match pitted mixed school teams that made rivalries feel quaint. Aurelio watched these cascades with cautious optimism. The flowers grew even taller, as if stretching to carry the extra weight of collective generosity. Meanwhile, adults began contributing in subtler ways. Senora Kwan, whose knees could no longer bend to plant, painted ceramic tiles depicting every flower species in the garden and glued them to the retaining wall so visitors could identify blooms. The corner mechanic started a free bicycle tune-up booth on Saturdays to match the garden's spirit, he said, shrugging at bewildered customers who tried to pay him. Officer Reyes arranged for the city to drop off rain barrels. She labeled them in English, Spanish, and Korean, and children took turns filling their watering cans. All this harmony inevitably attracted press. A journalist from the city paper arrived with notebook poised to unveil whatever angle sold copy, government negligence, urban guerrilla gardening, feel-good human interest. Neighborhood rumor said the journalist kept digging for a mastermind behind the miracles, but interviews looped back to the same refrain: ask the flowers. The story ran on page 12, a polite fluff piece about grassroots beautification. The wishes remained unprinted, guarded by a conspiracy of earnest faces. One afternoon, an unfamiliar boy, perhaps 13, waited outside the garden fence with a skateboard and a scowl. He introduced himself as Nico Ortiz, new to the block and unimpressed by fairy tales. His mother, he said, had cancer. You got a flower for that? He asked, half daring, half pleading. Aurelio inhaled slowly, feeling the gravity of the question spool through his chest. We have soil, he said. Bring your wish. Nico returned the next morning with a sheet torn from a maths notebook. I wish Mom's treatment works, and she stops being scared. Together, they buried it under a chrysanthemum cutting yet to bud. Over the next months, the neighborhood checked on Nico, brought meals, accompanied his mother to appointments. When the chrysanthemums opened, soft white, tips brushed lilac. Her test results showed the tumor had shrunk beyond predictions. Doctors credited a promising new protocol, but Nico pointed to the garden and said, community trial. Summer reached its zenith, and with it came preparations for the annual Esperanza Street Festival, usually a modest affair of food stalls and secondhand clothes. This year, the planning committee, chaired by a retired accountant who once scolded children for chalk drawings, declared the theme Bloom Together. Residents painted plywood cutouts of oversized blossoms, strung ribbons between balconies, and rehearsed dances choreographed to mimic petals unfurling. Aurelio was asked to serve as Grand Marshal, an honor he tried to decline until Lucia, now tall and braces free, told him, "You sowed the first seed. Let us water you back." On the morning of the festival, Aurelio arrived early to inspect the garden before marching. He noticed a single rose that had opened overnight in a corner he hadn't planted. Its hue was impossible to name, somewhere between sunrise and ember. Beneath it protruded the corner of a folded page. Curious, he knelt and read. The handwriting was small, adult, and shaky. I wish our gardener lives to see many more springs. No signature. Aurelio's eyes blurred, not from pollen. He tucked the paper back, watered the rose, and pressed a gentle kiss to its petal. The festival unfolded like a prism spun toward the sun. Colors refracted into music, banners, sizzling pans of pupusas and kimchi dumplings, laughter that ricocheted off brownstone facades. Children led the parade, carrying flower-laden bicycles. Aurelio followed, leaning on a cane carved from an old shovel handle one of the twins had fashioned for him. The elevated train halted for maintenance that weekend provided a silent grandstand where people perched, waving paper flowers. Mid-separation, a sudden breeze lifted thousands of petals, real and crafted, into the air, swirling them into a confetti cyclone. Camera phones rose like metallic orchids, strangers embraced instinctively under the petaled snow. That evening, as fireworks rattled windows and the scent of roasted corn drifted over rooftops, Aurelio sat on the library steps beside Officer Reyes. His bones throbbed with exquisite fatigue, but his spirit hummed. It's bigger than any of us now, Marta said, voice warm with awe. The magic, or whatever you call it, isn't hiding in the soil anymore. It's in them. She gestured at the throngs packing up stalls, exchanging leftovers, trading phone numbers. In us, she corrected herself. Aurelio nodded, massaging his thumb, where trowel blisters had thickened to callus. A garden's purpose, he whispered, is to teach time how to be patient and people how to be brave. Marta rested her head on his shoulder. They watched Diego lead a group picking stray trash, Lucia help Nico's mother navigate curbside cracks, the twins fold up festival tables, and dozens more acts of ordinary maintenance stitched together like a quilt. As the crowd thinned and street sweepers rolled in, Ariel rose to make one last circuit among the beds. Each bloom glowed under lamplight, foxgloves murmuring secret confidences, marigolds guarding familial prosperity, chrysanthemums holding vigil for fragile health, the rogue rose pulsing like a second heartbeat. He whispered gratitude to each, then returned his shears to the shed. Before locking up, he slipped a fresh journal into his pocket. Its first page awaited tomorrow's wishes. Word seeds eager for soil, for water, for faith. When he finally shuffled homeward, the city's bustle had softened into a lullaby of distant engines and bilingual goodnights drifting from open windows. Aurelio Santos, elderly gardener of a garden no longer small, walked beneath streetlights whose halos looked to anyone paying attention very much like flowers perpetually in bloom.